You didn't stumble upon these lines by accident. Something inside you is moving quietly, deeply, and far more powerfully than you realize. Perhaps you're standing at the point where life feels like it's cracking into pieces. Abandoned dreams, relationships slipping through your fingers. You wake up wondering if things will ever get better. If this is the final shape of your existence, it feels as though the world has closed in, leaving you lost in a space that is both dark and terrifyingly still. But Jung believed that the very moment you think you've hit rock bottom is when the transformation begins. He taught that the human soul only starts to mature when it is forced to look straight into its own darkness. And perhaps that's exactly where you are, standing on the thin boundary between breakdown and rebirth, between disorientation and a recovery of your true self, between believing you are ending and the truth that you are about to step into the greatest chapter of your life. To make this clearer, let me ask you one simple question. If this were not the sign of a comeback, why precisely at your most fragile moment have you been led to these words? The answer is right behind you. And once you hear it, you will never again see your pain in the same way. Very likely, this is the opening moment of the greatest comeback of your life. Number 1. Jung's paradox. Pain is the path to consciousness. Pain always terrifies us. We want to push it away, pretend it doesn't exist. Yet Jung saw pain from an entirely different angle. He regarded it as the secret door to the deepest regions of the soul. A strange paradox. The very thing we try to escape is the key to higher consciousness. Once you understand this, you will look at everything you're going through with completely new eyes. In those moments when life hurts so much you can barely breathe, you are not merely facing circumstances. You are facing yourself. Not the self you show the world, but the submerged primal part you yourself have denied again and again. Jung called this the meeting point between the ego and the unconscious. When the pain is enough, a person is forced to stop, forced to listen to voices they normally avoid. The feeling of breaking apart is not destruction. It is the first signal that the mask is worn thin, the shell has cracked, and what is truly inside you wants to be seen. Think of the last time you were hurt by something that felt all too familiar. A job you thought was secure is suddenly gone. A person you believed would stay ultimately left. Something you trusted betrayed you at your weakest moment. Such events usually make us angry, paralyzed, or despairing. But seen through Jung's eyes, they are the cold yet necessary touches that wake us up. Nothing makes us look at ourselves more clearly than disappointment and collapse. Imagine a dark room you've lived in since childhood. You've grown so used to the darkness that you don't know there's a door at the far end leading to a vast open space. Only when the room begins to crumble are you forced to find a way out. Pain works the same way. It makes it impossible to keep living with old habits, old beliefs, old understandings of yourself. It pushes you forward even when you don't want to go. And in that very moment, consciousness begins to open. Jung always emphasized that people do not change when everything is easy. We only grow when we have no choice but to face the truth inside. Many people say they only began to understand themselves after losing something they thought they could never lose. A woman after a breakup that felt like it tore her heart in two suddenly realized the worst pain wasn't losing the person. It was realizing she had never truly known her own needs. A man who failed at the job that once defined his pride spent a long night asking why he had relied solely on others' approval to feed his sense of worth. Those moments cut deep into the ego like a blade. But in that very cut, their real selves began to rise. Pain has the power to illuminate like a spotlight. It shines on false beliefs, self-destructive habits, and unrealistic expectations we've carried for years. It opens a new space in the mind where we can finally see clearly, no longer through the fog of illusion. Some people say that after passing through their darkest phase, the world suddenly looked different. Not because the world changed, but because pain had broken the old frames of thinking. And as consciousness expanded, they saw truths they previously lacked the courage to face. And here is the deepest point of Jung's paradox. When you are in pain, you feel as if you're being dragged downward. In reality, you are being pulled inwards to the place your soul has been whispering from for a long time, but you never stop to listen. Pain is not the enemy. It is the guide. It is the quiet invitation to become more conscious, more authentic, more whole. If you are hurting right now, Jung would not tell you to be strong immediately. He would simply invite you to place your hand on your chest and listen, because in this very moment, your consciousness is opening little by little. Number 2, the shadow and dialogue with the darkness. And precisely when consciousness opens through pain, you step across another threshold in Jung's philosophy. Their darkness is no longer the hunter. It becomes the starting point for a rebound stronger than anything you ever imagined. The shadow, according to Jung, is not something metaphysical. It is the sum of everything you try to hide. The anger you dare not admit, the fear you keep suppressed, the wounds you show no one, even the strengths you've forgotten you possess. Every person carries a locked chest. The irony is that the deeper it is buried, the more chaos it creates in your life. Jung believed the shadow never disappears. It simply waits at the edge for the right moment to rise and force you to look at it. That moment is usually when you feel your life is falling apart. Have you ever felt this? When betrayed, anger surges far beyond what seems reasonable. When criticized, the hurt cuts deeper than it should. When a small failure happens, it feels like the whole world is collapsing. Those reactions are not just responses to the event. They are reactions to old, undecoded pain. Compressed pieces of the shadow suddenly burst open and flood the surface. That very moment, Jung says, is the first open door of the comeback. Not because you are strong, but because the truth inside you has finally been allowed into the light. Jung repeatedly stressed that the shadow is not something to destroy. It is something to integrate. We mature not by erasing the dark parts, but by walking into them and bringing them into the light of consciousness. That process is the raw material of true metamorphosis. When you dare admit you are wounded, you are no longer controlled by the wound. When you look straight at what frightens you, fear loses its power. When you face your weakness, you discover the strongest part of you that has been asleep behind it. There is a fascinating psychological insight. The dark parts inside us always contain locked energy. Some people lock away anger, others creativity, others courage. When the shadow rises, that energy rises with it. It usually arrives as an uncomfortable emotion. But if you know how to receive it, it becomes the fuel of rebirth. Picture yourself sitting in front of a rough ore deposit. At first, it looks ugly, heavy, and hard to handle. But inside is precious metal you've never touched. Your shadow is exactly like that. To meet it, you need a method Jung considered the bridge into the unconscious. Dialogue with the shadow. Not some vague spiritual conversation, but an actual talk with the part you've been running from. The practice is simple, yet capable of unlocking doors you sealed years ago. Here's how. When a difficult emotion surges, write on paper as if that emotion were a person sitting across from you. If you're angry, ask it, what are you trying to protect? If you're afraid, ask, when did you first appear? If you feel weak, ask, what do you want me to know that I'm ignoring? Write everything without judgment. Let it answer in the most natural flow of words. The strange thing is that when you give the shadow a chance to speak, it doesn't destroy you as you feared. It explains. It points out old limits. It talks about memories you locked away. It reminds you that it didn't appear to drag you down, but to lead you to the deepest part of yourself. And when you listen long enough, you realize what Jung always emphasized. The shadow is the part of the soul that desperately longs to be integrated. Here is the most important point. The comeback does not begin when you escape the darkness. It begins the instant you stop running from it. The moment you turn around and say, "I want to understand this," because when you accept the confrontation, you shift from passive to active. You are no longer dragged by the shadow. You begin walking inside it on your own feet. And that is the moment your real power is activated. Number 3. Failure is the unconscious. Repeating the lesson. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, the unconscious speaks to you in its own language. Events that seem badly timed, doors that slam shut in your face, losses that shake your heart far more than they should. If you listen closely, behind every incident there is a message you may not yet be ready to read. Notice this. Why do you keep meeting the same kind of person who hurts you? Why you repeatedly end up in jobs that drain you? Why does something small throw you completely off balance? That's not bad luck. That is the deliberate repetition of the unconscious. When a lesson hasn't been learned, the unconscious brings it back in a bigger, sharper form you can no longer dodge. It doesn't want to punish you. It wants you to see what you're stubbornly refusing to see. Seen this way, confusion is a signal. Disappointment is a signal. The feeling, "Why me again?" is a signal. These signals are like a compass. The unconscious quietly turns toward the direction you need to go, even if you're not ready to admit it. Failure is sometimes the way the unconscious corrects your life's trajectory. From the outside, you see only loss. From the inside, it may be the first time your life is pulled back onto the right course. Jung called this the self-regulation of the psyche, a mysterious yet astonishingly precise mechanism that leaves us in awe when we look back. Number 4. The Journey of Individuation. At this point, you enter the most central concept in Jung's entire system of thought, the journey of individuation. This is no longer merely about failure or wounds. This is the journey of becoming the person you were born to be, not a copy shaped by expectations, fears, or the labels society pinned on you from childhood. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are," and that is the very soul of individuation. Individuation is not about changing yourself into a better version. It is the process of removing everything that does not belong to you. The roles you had to play in your family, the standards you tried to meet to be loved, the ways of living that were never yours yet you maintained because you thought you should. Individuation is like stepping out of a dark room you have lived in your whole life simply because someone told you it was safe. The fascinating thing is that this journey is not always comfortable. There are phases when you will feel completely disoriented because you are no longer the old self, yet the new self has not yet formed. Jung called this the transitional void, the space where the soul is restructuring itself. When you start walking toward your true self, subtle signs appear that you are on the right path. A gentle peace in your chest, strange coincidences, the right people finding you, doors opening without force. The process is never easy, yet it is the deepest liberation a human being can experience. Because in the end, you no longer live as a character in someone else's story. You return to being the author of your own. Number 5. The practice of sitting with pain. If individuation is the process of becoming yourself, then sitting with pain is the first ritual that allows you to step through that door. Because there are things the soul will only reveal when you are still enough to listen. In Jung's view, pain is not the enemy. It is a messenger from the unconscious, knocking when you have strayed too far from your true self. Yet most of us respond by running, throwing ourselves into work, clinging to others, keeping busy. Anything. As Jung wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Sitting with pain means do not try to fix it, explain it, or turn it positive. It means letting it appear exactly as it is. A heaviness in the chest, an emptiness in the heart, a tightness in the throat, an anger that has never been named. And that is the very gateway into the deepest unconscious. Jung believed that when an emotion is fully felt, it finds its own way to dissolve. No forcing, no suppressing, just true presence. Imagine pain as a child abandoned in the dark. It doesn't need your lectures. It only needs you to sit beside it. Emotions are the same. When you sit with them, they soften. When you look straight at them, they stop screaming. When you give them safe space, they begin to speak the truth. Pain is the beginning of honesty with yourself. Sitting with pain is the act of facing the truth without judgment. When you hold that tension long enough, what Jung called transmutation occurs. And when you dare to sit with pain, you discover something very strange. The pain was never trying to kill you. It shows you where your limits are. It reveals which needs inside you remain unmet. It points out what in your life is misaligned. Pain is the silent, patient guide waiting for you to be brave enough to listen. Number 6. The practice of intuition. Jung said, intuition is the ability to know truth without going through logic, an ancient form of intelligence that lies deeper than reason. And the fascinating thing is intuition cannot awaken while your mind is noisy. It only begins to function when pain has been seen, when emotions have settled, when you stop running from yourself. In that stillness, intuition rises like clear water from the bottom of a deep well. Not hurried, not loud, but so accurate it makes you shiver. Awakening intuition begins with the small signals you usually ignore. A contraction in the chest when something is wrong for you. A strange lightness when thinking of a new direction. A feeling of rightness that appears just before an important decision, even though you can't explain it. In Jungian psychology, these signals are the meeting point between the conscious and unconscious. So how do you awaken intuition? Daily silence. 5 to 10 minutes. Hand on chest. Ask, what is moving inside me right now? Dialogue writing with emotion. Let the hand write without censorship. Listen to the body's immediate reactions before the mind rationalizes. Reduce analysis. Increase feeling. How does it feel? Instead of, is this logically right? When you practice long enough, intuition does not teach you to go faster. It teaches you to go in the right direction. Number 7. Signs of shifting. The first shift usually appears inside your emotions, a subtle lightening in places that once felt heavy. You no longer react as intensely as before. Things that used to enrage you now only make you quiet. This is not numbness. It is the psyche restructuring itself from within. Another sign. You stop trying to please everyone. Stop chasing standards that were never yours. Stop clinging to things that have clearly outlived their place. That, not trying, is clarity. The shift also appears in how you see the world. Things that once terrified you lose their power. You begin to sense a gentle, yet distinct current pulling you toward goals you never dared consider before. Every evening, write down 3 small things that made you feel different from the person you were yesterday. These minor changes are the footprints of your return. And perhaps the most beautiful sign of the comeback is a peace that needs no reason. One morning you wake up and feel space inside your chest, as if a thick layer of clouds has finally parted after years. Number 8. Synchronicity. Jung describes synchronicity as meaningful coincidence events that seem random, yet arrive exactly when you need them with no logical explanation. It is the unconscious influencing reality, creating external signals to guide you. When the inner world shifts, the outer world responds. Synchronicity cannot be forced. It only appears when you begin living in the direction your true self is calling. To recognize it more clearly, write down every coincidence that makes you pause before sleep. Quietly ask for a sign tomorrow. Notice the warmth or gentle tap on the shoulder when it happens. These are proof that unconscious and conscious are now on the same side, and the world outside is adjusting to your new frequency. Conclusion. If you have read this far, something deep inside you already knows you are no longer the same person who began this journey. A part of you has heard, has resonated, has recognized. What once brought you to your knees was not just wounds. It was the imprint of a path quietly changing direction. The outside may not have shifted much yet. No one else may notice you are transforming. But Jung would tell you this: the greatest turning points in a person's life always begin in silence, where no one sees except your own soul. From today forward, you do not need to come back in the loud way the world celebrates. The greatest comeback is not when you prove anything to anyone. It is when you stop betraying yourself. So do not worry whether you have gone far enough or strong enough yet. Just remember one thing. From the moment you began looking inside with eyes that no longer turn away, your story has already turned the page. The rest, as Jung quietly reminds us, let the soul lead the way.